Welcome to the ninth edition of Poets of All Time, and this time we have Pablo Neruda or Pablo Neruda. Now, how does he look like? He looks like this. Small story, let me begin with. In the late 80s or early 90s, when I was a young lecturer in Khalikote College, my friend Professor Dilip Das actually borrowed for me from the library of Barambar University an edition of Pablo Neruda, a yellow covered book, and it was given to me. I I remember, I was starving for it. I so hungrily read all the lines. I didn't have money, actually, frankly speaking, I didn't have money then. But later I had money and I purchased this book, Pablo Neruda. And then I was happy that I was owner of a book of verse written by Pablo Neruda by Nathaniel Turn. He was the editor. And then when I was a lecturer in English in BJP Junior College, we had this book, Approaches to English, Book 2. I think this must be familiar with many. And then I had to teach a poem called Girl Lithe and Tony. Girl Lithe and Tony by Pablo Neruda. Some of you, if you have confusion, let me make it clear. Girl Lithe, L-I-T-H-E, Lithe, L-I-T-H-E, Lithe, and Tony, T-A-W-N-Y, Tony. Let me read out the lines. I like his short poems, not his long poems. This is a short poem. Girl Lithe and Tony. Girl Lithe and Tony, the sun that forms the fruits, that plumps the grains, the curls, seaweeds, filled your body with joy, and your luminous eyes, and your mouth that has the smile of the water. A black yearning sun is braided into the strands of your black mane. When you stretch your arms, you play with the sun as with a little brook, and it leaves two dark pools in your eyes. Girl Lithe and Tony, nothing draws me towards you, everything bears me farther away. As though you were known, you were the fringed youth of the bee, the drunkenness of the wave, the power of the wheat ear. Thy somber heart searches for you, nevertheless, and I love your joyful body, your slender and flowing voice, dark butterfly, sweet and definitive, like the wheat field and the sun, the poppy and the water. This is called a poem, Girl Lithe and Tony by Pablo Neruda. So let me make it clear now. Neruda was basically poet of the elements. What are the elements? The earth, the sky, water, fire. He was the poet of the elements. He was a wonderful poet. He was a great poet. He was born in Chile. I'll go to details, but before that, let me also read some wonderful lines by Pablo Neruda. And I must make it clear, there is no poet who has not read Pablo Neruda. Not only that, I must say, there is no poet who has not been influenced by Pablo Neruda. Neruda is a great poet of the 20th century, and I think his contribution is really a lot. He comes from Latin America. He is not English. He is not English. He is not canonical. What is canonical? Shakespeare is canonical, Milton is canonical, T.S. Eliot is canonical. The non-canonical poet is from Latin America, but he was a great influence behind most of the poets, all poets of 20th century in the whole wide world. This is Pablo Neruda for you. There is a man called Louis Corvalan. Pablo's Examples. He wrote a book, Pablo's Examples from El Siglo. We all know that he has sung in praise of everything: love, birds, stones, southern rains, the raw Pacific Ocean, the Arcoan pine, cactus, spoons, onions, salmon-bellied eels, everything he ever saw and touched with his poet's eye and feelings, and also human beings, our national heroes, our Araucanian forefathers, the miners, the railroaders, the bakers, workers of all kinds, the great epics of our time. He has written moving verses for his party, poetry of love for his people, and poetry of fire against the enemy. Pablo Neruda was a poet, but he was also a politician. He combined politics with poetry. That's something rare. So far, I had not seen any other poet doing this, but he did it, and he was successful. Neruda was born Ricardo Elisar Neptali Reyes Basolto in Paral, a small village in Chile's Central Valley. When he was just 1 month old, his mother died and his father married again, and he was a train engineer, remarried and moved his family to the remote city of Temuco, a lushly forested setting of almost constant rain. And that predominates Neruda's poetry, the rain, sea and forest, derived from his first 15 years spent in Temuco. The headmistress at Neruda's school was the poet Gabriela Mistral, who was the first Latin American poetess, and he got Nobel Prize for Literature in 1945. She was a great influence on Neruda, and Neruda got it much later. But Gabriela Mistral, the headmistress who got the Nobel Prize, was a big influence on the life of Pablo Neruda. The name Pablo Neruda is a pseudonym. I think all of you know what is a pseudonym. Pseudonym is a false name. His name was different, that's what I read out, a long name. But Pablo Neruda, his surname, taking his surname from the 19th century Czech author Jan Neruda, leader of the Eastern European symbolists. I'll read out his poem called Body of a Woman. How beautifully he writes, how beautifully he writes. Body of a woman, white heels, white thighs, you resemble a world in your pose of surrender. My raw peasant's body wildly digs in you and makes the nun leap from the depth of the earth. It was only like a tunnel. The birds fled from me. The night overcame me with this powerful invasion. In order to survive, I forced you like a weapon, like an arrow in my bow, like a stone in my sling. How beautiful! How beautifully he writes. He had direct contact with another great poet called Federico Garcia Lorca, Spanish poet. And then, of course, both of them, they fell out. And he wrote a volume called Spain in My Heart in 1937. I'm reading another short poem. Ode to a Lemon. Ode to a Lemon. He could take anything for his theme. So while the hand holds the caught half of a lemon, half a world on a plate, a universe of gold overflows, a cup yellow with the miracles, one of the nipples fragrant from the breast of the earth, the ray of light that made fruit, the little fire of a planet. His later years were marked by worldwide travel and increasing international recognition, culminating in getting his Nobel Prize for Literature in 1971, and he died in 1973. He was a follower of the great Chilean dictator called Salvador Allende. Salvador Allende, Salvador Allende, 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 but it is pronounced as Allende. You must have heard about the great Chilean novelist also. She is also Allende. So, he remained active when Salvador Allende was dethroned, toppled. Neruda also suffered because he was his follower and he was denied the facility of going to hospital in an ambulance, and he suffered from cancer and died. Pablo Neruda fulfills what P.B. Shelley, the great romantic British poet, says. Poets are the unacknowledged legislators of the world, and he was the unacknowledged legislators of the world. Let me read out something from this collection of Nathaniel Twine, Pablo Neruda. Twine says, Pablo Neruda is like Emerson's poet in that he puts eyes and tongues into every dumb and inanimate object. How beautiful it is. He puts eyes and tongues into every dumb and inanimate object, and as the eyes of Lycaeus were said to see the earth, so the poet turns the world to glass and shows us all things in their right series and process. So too Neruda wants a poetry that breaks the walls of silence around crystal, wood and stone. There are many poems written by Pablo Neruda. He was, I think, was a very voluminous poet. My teacher, Professor Sailendra Mishra, used to talk about the heights of Machu Picchu. So I was really thinking, what is this Machu Picchu? Machu Picchu is a forest somewhere in Brazil, and there is a mountain, Machu Picchu. So the heights of Machu Picchu, through a confusion of splendor, through night made stone, let me plunge my hand and move to beat in me a bird held for 1,000 years, the old and unremembered human heart. Today let me forget this happiness, wider than all the sea, because man is wider than all the sea and our necklace of islands, and we must fall into him as down a well to clamber back with branches of secret water, recondite truths. Allow me to forget circumference of stone, the powerful proportions. Rising to birth with me as my own brother. So this is an extract from the heights of Machu Picchu by Pablo Neruda. He was a great poet. He was there and he traveled all over the world, sometimes as commissioner, sometimes as ambassador, in various capacities. He was loyal to Salvador Allende. Later on he fell out and then he was dethroned like his administrator, and of course he died because he was denied the service of an ambulance which could have taken him to hospital and he could have survived, but he died. So that is about Pablo Neruda. He was a great poet. You should read this collection, and then you will be surprised to know that some of his poems have been translated by people like Anthony Kerrigan, W.S. Merwin the poet, Alastair Reid, Nathaniel Turn. Please read this book, Pablo Neruda, Selected Poems. You will know what sort of poet he was. He was the poet of elements. He was the poet of elements, the sky, the rain. And to quote, let me quote, taking a term from celluloid, from cinema. He was the producer, he was the director, he was the actor, and then he was the cameraman. And his pen was like a camera that panned across entire nature, and he captured all the rain, fire, sky, stream, sun, fruits, everything. He was a great poet, and I pay my tributes to this great man, Pablo Neruda.